Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. My name is Amy Elmore, and today we'll be talking about the vision for our future as we grow in Hillsborough County. Just a few things to keep in mind before we get started. This meeting is being recorded and will be available after the meeting. Please keep your microphone muted and your camera off throughout the meeting unless you'd like to speak during our Q&A and breakout sessions. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat box in your Zoom panel. We will have time for questions at the end of our meeting. You'll be able to use the raise hand button to ask your question, or you can type them into the chat. Any questions that we're not able to get to today, we will make sure to follow up with you afterwards. If you have technical issues during the presentation, please email charlesc@plancom.org and someone will contact you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Leinhard. I work for the Planning Commission. I just wanted to say thank you for being here today and for taking time out of your evening. This is the agenda we're going to work through this evening. So after the welcome and introductions, we'll then talk a little bit about what a comprehensive plan is, what the future land use section is. Then we'll go through what types of changes we're anticipating as part of the update for the future land use section. We'll then break out into some small groups and we'll talk through 5 questions. We'll then move into next steps and how you can stay involved in the process moving forward. And then we'll end the evening with some questions and answers. Next slide, please. This is the team that's working with you tonight. So again, my name is Melissa Leinhard and I work with the Planning Commission. I'm the co-project manager for the future land use section update along with Andrea Papandrew. And then our consultant team, we have the project manager, Amy Elmore, who introduced us in the beginning of the session. And then we have tonight, Michelle Simmons with us, as well as Alex Burns. And Amy, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melissa. So today we're focusing on the question, what will unincorporated Hillsborough County look like in 20 years? That's what we're trying to discover as we update our comprehensive plan's future land use section. Please feel free to take our survey and help us learn how we should grow. You can scan the QR code that you see here on the screen or visit bit.ly/letusknowhc. Please note, if you have questions specific to you or that you'd like to discuss with another department, here are a few helpful phone numbers on the screen. We'll also be happy to talk with you after today's session and make sure that your questions get to the right folks. So to start us off, I'd love to open this up with a quick poll question. We would love to hear from you. What are the most noticeable changes you have seen in your neighborhood and community in the last 5 years? You should see that popping up on your screen now. And you can choose excellence. We've got new commercial developments, changes in traffic and transportation, new residential developments. And please also feel free to type your answers into the chat if there's something else that you've noticed. We'd love to hear your thoughts. More people moving in and out of my neighborhood. Excellent. Less green space. Absolutely. We'll give this just another second. Fantastic. And we can go ahead and end less agriculture. I see that. And we can go ahead and end that poll. And if you don't mind showing the share the results. Excellent. Looks like quite a few changes in traffic and new commercial developments, as well as new residential developments and less green space, like less agriculture. Excellent. Thank you so much. So we want to get into our discussion today, but first I'd like to give you an overview of our comprehensive plan and future land use. So what is a comprehensive plan? Essentially, it's a legally required document that sets a long-range policy direction for our community. It provides high-level direction on land use, environmental protection, infrastructure, mobility, and public services. And it is updated every 7 to 10 years. Currently, we've updated most of the sections within the comprehensive plan. This comprehensive plan we call Creating Great Places. Now, as we move through our updates, we're identifying goals, objectives, and policies that align to set our community up for success. Goals are general statements about a desired future outcome. They provide a long-term vision and serve as the plan's foundation. Objectives are more specific statements that provide direction to achieve a given goal. And a policy is a specific course of action or rule of conduct used to achieve goals and objectives of a plan. In other words, policies guide the day-to-day decision-making. But when we're looking at our goals, objectives, and policies, we also want to make sure that they are achievable and implementable, as there are things that the comprehensive plan can do and things that it cannot do. So a comprehensive plan can envision future growth. It summarizes our community values and designates growth and preservation areas. It can provide consistency, especially related to aligning new development with the community's vision. The comprehensive plan can help to prioritize funding, guiding infrastructure improvements within specific areas. And it can also protect our resources and separate incompatible land uses to ensure we have a thriving community. The comprehensive plan cannot issue or manage permits, enforce code regulations, design roadway improvements or manage traffic and parking, regulate specifications for building layouts, implement or change zoning districts, or identify engineering or stormwater specifications. So think of the comprehensive plan as the 30,000-foot view of the community that helps to set the vision 20 to 30 years out. Within the comprehensive plan, there's a section called future land use. So we're going from the 30,000-foot view to the 10,000-foot view. And that future land use designates areas into broad categories, like putting residential homes in one area, commercial in another, and industrial space in another. Then it separates incompatible land uses, making sure we don't put a landfill next to a school, or ensuring that we direct growth into more commercial and economic areas, or even mixed use areas that include a variety of uses. This section also includes a future land use map, so we can guide new development on where they should grow. And it outlines the range of uses and maximum densities and intensities in an area. Now, it's very easy to get future land use mistaken with zoning, but if the comprehensive plan is the 30,000-foot view, the future land use section is the 10,000-foot view, then the zoning is the ground view. Zoning regulates building size, setbacks, and specific uses. It can approve or deny developments. It can define specific zoning districts. And though future land use and zoning work together to maintain a healthy, safe, and welfare, right now we're focusing on the future land use, which guides the purpose and the character of growth. Throughout this process, you may hear us talk about the urban service area. So this is a part of our future land use section that pinpoints where current growth is focused. One thing that is really unique about Hillsborough County is that we have choices on where we want to live. We can live in an urban area, in the suburbs, or in a more rural area. And the urban service area is what identifies urban, suburban, and rural areas throughout the county, allowing us to have these choices. As we continue to grow, we know that we are running out of land that is vacant, developable, or redevelopable within the urban service area. By 2045, unincorporated Hillsborough County will see 350,000 more people and 107,000 more jobs. We'll also have an increasing demand for transportation, public county services, schools, and recreation. And that's what this update is all about. We're trying to identify how we should grow and where we should grow, and that's where we need your help. So let's take another quick poll for another minute. We'd love to know more about your priorities. What are your most important priorities for your neighborhood or community as Hillsborough County continues to grow? And we've got a few choices on the screen here. You can select those. Again, feel free to type anything else that you think of into the chat. Creating new multimodal transportation options. Excellent. Keep the same density for housing. Increase a variety of housing types. Fantastic. More folks want the multimodal transportation options. More open space, recreational space, mixing uses. I love it in the chat. Fantastic. Give you just another minute on that poll. Promote employment and economic growth. These are great things coming in. Fantastic. And we can go ahead and close that. And if you don't mind sharing the results for that, please. Excellent. So we have a lot with keeping the same density for housing, multimodal transportation options, really bringing people choices with how they get around, promoting employment and economic growth. Fantastic. Thank you so much. As we move forward, we are anticipating several changes within the comprehensive plan's future land use section. The majority of these changes will be minor streamline process changes. However, we do anticipate a few other changes which we'll be discussing in more detail at our upcoming public meetings in May, June, and July. Before we get into our discussion today, I'll give you a quick overview of these topics. At the next public meeting in May, we'll be taking a deep dive into 4 components. The first is our mixed use density and intensity bonus. This update will be looking at modifying the mixed use bonus based on experience that staff has had with consistency reviews. Currently, during the rezoning process, staff has had a difficulty ensuring that new development is using the bonus includes a mix of uses as required. So part of the update will be to clarify the existing bonus language and ensure that developments requesting the bonus are meeting the plan requirements during the building stage. Next is our centers and connections section. I'm personally very excited about this section because it will encourage growth in areas where communities desire it, by allowing density and intensity bonuses in specific centers and corridors. Please note that this work is done in line with adopted community plans within the urban service area. So some community plans have specified areas where they would like to see increased density and intensity. And the centers and connections work reflects those community visions. The intent is to expand housing opportunities in areas that will enhance mixed use, improve walkability, and a sense of place. We'll also be taking a look at our commercial location criteria. We'll be updating the framework for allowing non-residential development in residential land use categories. Commercial location criteria was established to ensure residents can meet their daily needs for goods and services within a reasonable distance from their neighborhood. These daily needs may be a grocery store, gas stations, healthcare, getting your hair done. And the commercial location criteria also establish standards to ensure the compatibility of commercial activities with nearby residential neighborhoods. The results of this recent study for the commercial location criteria was not transmitted by the Board of County Commissioners, and it will be revised to reflect the Board of County Commissioners' direction and folded into our future land use update. Last, we'll look at transit-oriented development. This is a type of urban development that locates residential, commercial, and leisure space near or around public transit stations like bus stops, tram, metro, or light rail. Our existing policies are adopted in the comprehensive plan, and the intent is to streamline and update the approach so we're consistent with HART and the City of Tampa. Overall, this approach is designed to create more mobility choices for all of our residents and communities. And again, we'll take a deeper dive into these 4 topics at our May meetings. In June, we'll focus on one primary component, the timing and growth of expansion areas, specifically as it relates to any potential expansion of the urban service area. This update recognizes that we will need to expand by 2045, and that a lot of planning needs to occur before that line is expanded. This update will not recommend specific areas of expansion, but will recommend what factors should be considered and what approach be taken when studying areas for future expansion. So one last poll before we head into our breakout sessions. What characteristics of your neighborhood or community do you feel need to be preserved as we continue growing? Again, feel free to type anything else you think of into the chat, and we'll give everyone just a minute to respond to our poll. Excellent. We've got preserve existing density of housing, preserve open spaces and agricultural uses, preserve community assets like our schools and community centers, fantastic. Preserve a wide variety of housing types. Oh, we're getting up on our open spaces, fantastic. Excellent. Just another minute here. Still nothing yet, so we all want to preserve something. That's good. Goods and services, community assets, housing and agricultural uses right now is at the most, fantastic. We'll go ahead and end that and share our results. Looks like we've got quite a few folks wanting those open spaces, which I love my parks. I love my agricultural uses. So I understand variety of housing types, perfect. All right, so we're about to go into our breakout groups. This is a very interactive discussion where one of our team members will take you through a few discussion questions. You will be automatically placed into this room so you can sit back and relax. Once you're in the room, feel free to turn on your microphones if you'd like. You can also still use the raise hand button. And after the breakout rooms, we'll all come back together to report back what we've heard. All right, we'll keep moving forward. So thank you everyone for an excellent discussion. I know our group had a wonderful time, and I truly enjoyed hearing everyone's thoughts. I'd love to go around to each group to hear a few overarching thoughts from your discussion. So leaders, I'll ask that you get us started when I call on you, and then I'll invite anyone else in your group to join. We do have just a few minutes for this before our Q&A. So I will be happy to get us started with my group. We had a really great discussion about our strengths from our nonprofit community. And let me bring up my notes so that I can make sure I hit everything. From our nonprofit community that is so collaborative to our wonderful area plans in Citrus Park and West Chase, our variety of unique aspects within our different areas, our diversity, our community's values, and that mix of rural and urban life, that small town feel with our trees and parks. Our group wanted to see, really retaining lower areas on the outskirts, like more rural areas with that mixed use. So we have a transition from place to place. They especially liked the Winthrop example of a mixed use as a kind of a prototype, so that the right kind of mixed use is used where we provide opportunities and encourage more commercial uses. We also had this dedication to cohesiveness and an emphasis on our history that we wanted to see within the development, as well as more connected and better utilization of our green spaces. As far as wanting to preserve, definitely our green spaces. And then also, I thought this was really unique, preservation of our plans as we're creating these long range plans, making sure that we're not able to deviate from those plans very easily, that even with kind of day-to-day decision making, that something points back to that plan. We also wanted to see really a preservation of our historic areas so that we're showcasing the vibrant community that we are, our agricultural lands like our blueberry and strawberry farms, and then again, the wildlife, our natural spaces, our ecosystem. And last, well, we got to this question only, what should we try to avoid? And interestingly enough, we wanted to avoid a fear of density, because density in certain areas in the right places actually allows for other types of neighborhoods to be preserved. So with that, did anyone from my group want to add anything that I might have missed? All right, fantastic. Let's go with Andrea.
So Alex actually was leading the group. I wasn't. So I'm gonna pivot to him.
Absolutely, Alex.
I can jump in. Yeah. All right. So strengths. One of the strengths was somebody brought up was our communication with each other, with county government, like-minded thinkers, but also a diversity of thinkers. It was brought up that we have really the whole urban transect represented. We have the downtown urban core, we have the suburbs, we have the rural areas. And so we really we have a representation of everything in Hillsborough County. And then we have a lot of money and resources to be able to do things to make necessary changes. Types of development people wanted to see. Really, there was a common thread of we need more affordable housing, we need more density where it's appropriate. But people were saying in areas that are far away from the center of town, we should not be putting up tons of apartment complexes where you're just creating tons of traffic for all those people who may need to go to downtown Tampa for work or for entertainment or recreation. And so we're just adding a ton of traffic on, and there's out here, there's not a lot of alternate routes. If you're down in Waimama, your alternate route is to go basically all the way up to Big Bend Road, which is like 8 miles north or something like that. So it's not really viable. So if you get stuck in traffic, you're just stuck. So that was a common thread was we need more housing, we need more, but we need to put it where it's appropriate. And then range of housing choices, and then really along that same line, keeping the outskirts lower density. Specifically, people were mentioning down in South County, where the development has just exploded in the past 8 to 10 years. And this leads me to another common thread was that we cannot be continuing to do this development until we have the infrastructure to support it. Traffic, water, schools was brought up multiple times in my group, that our schools are all overcrowded, and people have noticed that the quality of the education has suffered. So they're having to take their kids farther away to attempt to find a good school. Things we want to preserve, people mentioned preserving the history, preserving our natural environment, and then preserving our agricultural and low density areas. And then things we want to avoid, again, too much development without considering infrastructure and county service needs. Take back control from developers. That was a good answer to that question. It seems right now to those of us in the community that developers are in control, and we need to, the county government really needs to be saying, no, you cannot just develop as much as you want. We have to be able to keep up with the needs of the people as you develop. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. Is there anyone else from Alex's group who wants to add anything?
Hey, I'm Dave. Just what I've been saying in the chat there, I am really curious about how many people are from the rural areas, because it seems to be completely two different needs, which he pointed out, and we did kind of get that out of our conversation. I mean, from a big overview from 10,000 feet, to use your words, maybe we need two different counties. Maybe we need to split this up because the needs are so different. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's move on to Melissa's group.
Yeah.
It looks like you have a question from somebody. Their hand is raised.
Sure, we'll get to questions in just a little bit. Right now, we're going to do a report out, and then feel free to type your questions into the chat. And then we'll do questions right after our report out. We'll have about 30 minutes for Q&A. Melissa?
And Amy, I jumped around a little bit tonight, which was great. And I was in a session with Michelle. So Michelle can probably report back from that group. And then I also was with Wally's group, who also led that and can report back.
Perfect. Let's go ahead with Wally.
Hello, everyone. Wally speaking. Just want to give a quick shout out to the participants in my group. They were really vocal and involved, and that's the whole point of this meeting, is to really incorporate people's perspectives and allow them a medium to really amplify their voices. So again, shout out to my group. We were able to get to 4 to 5 questions. So what were our community strengths? Well, one of the participants said open spaces, a sense of community, and they really showcase, and they mentioned the benefits of the community plan and how it's helpful in seeing how the community can develop and flourish. Agriculture, farming, diversity. One of the participants really highlighted the coastal community feel of their community, which I thought was important. And I thought something that was interesting was one of them mentioned thoughtful growth. Tired of seeing things like storage units, industrial focal points instead of commercial uses that residents actually need. So I thought that was really important. So for the second question, what types of development do you want to see? One of the really things that were to me that highlighted the conversation was self-sustaining communities. So areas that can absorb traffic and trips, and communities where they can all work, live, and play. Mixed use types of developments was something that was very was mentioned. And another thing was redevelopment to make our areas more livable. For the third question, what do we want to preserve? Protect our water resources, super important, especially nowadays. And they talked about how we need to stop catering to the developers and start making them responsible for following development standards, and preserve more agricultural lands, environmentally sensitive areas, parks, trails, historic features, corridors for new roadways to serve as connections. And we need to preserve the integrity of the land, making less exceptions and connection points and trails and parks. And then finally, we skipped the fourth question, and we really talked about the last question was what community needs will increase with more growth. And one of the members of my group spoke about how open spaces get filled with unnecessary development or unwanted development, and how congestion is a problem, which makes it difficult to get to one point to another. And we need to look at these before we get behind. And so that's a super important question, a point and comment that one of the members of my group mentioned. But that was it. And yeah, so thank you.
Fantastic. Excellent. All right, let's see, Jillian.
Hi, so a lot of the things that have been mentioned already were things that we discussed in our group as well. Some of the community strengths that were noted were the diversity that we have here in the county as far as cultures, history, historic sites. Some other strengths are waterfront property, you know, the local private beaches. Also just the variety of environments that are available to choose to live in. So, you know, just the option to move to a rural, suburban, or urban type of area. And then one comment which I thought was great is that our community is military friendly, and I thought that was really good to know. Let's see, what types of development do you want to see? Somebody said none, and that they would not like to see any more development because they feel that we are growing quite rapidly and not keeping up with the infrastructure that's needed to support it. Somebody noted that they would like to see more affordable housing and incentives for developers to build affordable housing. Public infrastructure, like I mentioned before, the roadways and the utilities to support all of the residential and commercial development that's coming down the pipeline. And then to further expand on that, somebody mentioned that we need to improve, expand, and maintain the public facilities such as schools to support the new development coming in. And then finally, somebody mentioned that they'd like to see more mixed use and increased density in housing, but that not only single family or, you know, multifamily apartment buildings, but that missing middle housing, you know, the duplexes and triplexes that a lot of people often are seeking to find. What would you like to preserve? The nature in general, forested areas, wildlife habitats, the private local beaches, specifically in the Lithia and Fishhawk area, the historic communities, you know, buildings and landmarks. They want to preserve the rural area in general and allow, you know, less dense housing. And somebody noted that they want to preserve the historically Black communities. And those, we didn't get to the last two questions, but we had a lot of good discussion, and a lot of the things that have already been discussed were discussed in our group as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jillian. How about Caitlin? Just give us an overarching picture. We just have a few minutes left.
Alrighty. Honestly, I would say that my group was awesome, and we were kind of similar with it was just the answers just depended on the location, because Hillsborough County was so vast in so many different communities that the needs and the preservation and the growth just kind of depended on the location of where you lived. So we definitely had downtown versus rural, I think, as different things. I would say that the major strengths was just the growth in downtown Tampa, and as for rural areas, the agriculture that they're able to, you know, produce now is awesome. As far as the development they wanted to see, just continue growing in downtown, produce that high quality work versus low quality, improve landscaping, and just all of that. And rural, just keep it compatible with the character that it has. I would say our biggest thing that we focused on was preserving, which is preserving the open space, protect those private lakes and wetlands and natural resources. And really, there are choices right now within the Hillsborough County area between suburban and rural and urban. Like, there's so many different choices, but keep it that way rather than, you know, either overcrowding rural areas, or instead of making it one big place that's all the same, keep the choices and keep Florida really for what Florida is and what Florida is known for, and kind of keep that diversity of the city that was and currently remains, instead of making it one giant same thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but they were really good about kind of keeping the different areas different, you know, so it was a great discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Caitlin. I think Gina, I don't think we've gotten to you.
No, you haven't, and it's okay. I'll try to be really brief. I had the most talkative people were from like South Shore, Valrico, the Dover area. And it was interesting for me to hear from people in that more suburban and rural community. But they really loved the community strength of being able to work and play in Tampa, but come home to where it's peaceful and it's quiet and it's changing, but that's the kind of the assets and strengths that they really loved. That there was a nice mix at this time of agricultural and commercial and residential. There was a nice mix of those services and zonings, but that having families that could go to different cultural centers like parks and schools were an asset as well. The types of development, this was an interesting, because I didn't hear this from anybody else, but like commercial areas that are walkable. You may have to drive to get there, but that you can go between those different centers of commerce, like a strip center or, you know, other kinds of resident commercial development, and be able to walk to the different things throughout there. So maybe having it more accessible. There was also an interesting comment about the type of residential development, but having a variety in both the houses and the color, you know, that they're too close to each other. But I love that the variety in color came up. I thought that was really interesting. Single family homes was predominantly what folks liked, but they also said, but let's preserve the historical urban areas like Hyde Park and Seminole Heights and Ybor, because those are, they offer, you know, wonderful living for that type of, if people want to live in the urban community. I'm almost done. Preserving kind of the same thing. Open spaces, farm, that peacefulness. Things to avoid, we're definitely focused on traffic and avoiding the roads are overloaded, local roads as well as those big arterials that we normally talk about, but the local roads seem to be full of traffic, and that although we might be lack density in those communities, that transit should definitely be something that we continue to look for as a solution for those particular problems with traffic. And lastly, the last one was the community needs housing came up, just like it sounds like everyone else, for younger families that are affordable, that we have a homelessness or homeless population that may continue to grow too over time, and that we need to be considering housing for them, and transportation also came up, but I heard that already. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. And before we get to a couple other folks, we're not able to, we've gotten a couple of requests to add a poll. We can't add a poll right now, but feel free to let us know in the chat where you're from. Are you from an urban area? Are you from a rural area? Suburban? Is there a particular area that you want to highlight? Feel free to add that in the chat and we'll make sure to record that as well. Let's go ahead, Vishaka.
Hi, I was actually in a room where I had another moderator, Michelle, so I would let her speak. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Vishaka. Michelle, is there anything we haven't heard yet that your group wants to add?
Hi, Amy. I would just say that one of the most profound items was what we should try to avoid as we continue to grow. And one person in my group said, try to avoid being so adversarial, that the pro groups and the anti groups should somehow try to come together to get on the same page. Of course, that's very important. One of the other things I heard that I kind of defined out was with mass transportation. I understood one of my participants to need that first and last mile. That's something that we talk about in transportation and public transit. I thought that was really interesting, ensuring that if you want to get people to use public transportation, there's got to be that connectivity between the first and the last mile. And the other thing that was raised was attainable housing, which I thought was a very great usage of the word. We hear affordable a lot, but attainable housing, meaning housing for all. So some of the very same things, but those were things that stood out. Oh, one last thing is the Live Local Act, giving the developers a lot of leeway with this big pot of money that's been shared through that act, and just making sure that developers are held to task. But pretty much the same, but those are the outstanding notes.
Thank you, Michelle. And
If I could just interrupt really quickly, just so that there's not misinformation. There's a lot of folks, I think, on this call who may be aware of Live Local and some of the terminology in the statute that was passed and signed into law by the governor. But there are significant guidelines in that in terms of the pots of money that they are only to be awarded to affordable housing projects. And I think if we let folks think that developers somehow have been giving a blank check, it could be misleading. So I just want to clarify that there are lots of rules and regulations that go into how those monies are going to be provided in certain communities.
May I say something, if you don't mind, because the affordable house definition came up during our meeting as well. Like, what is the definition of affordable housing? Because we have seen where in Channel Side specifically, where affordable housing was in a new development, and they're calling it $2,400. That's nowhere affordable for no one.
yeah,
So how is it?
So
how
not
is
to
it better?
hijack the discussion, but I was actually on a call today with this very topic. And there's lots of resources that all the affordable rental rates and income rates are just determined by the state. And it's based on adjusted median income, the number of people who live in the house or cohabitate makes a difference. So it could be that in certain areas, the affordable housing value is higher than others.
Right.
And that's distributed by county and locations.
Nancy and Josie, I'm happy to talk about this after the meeting if you'd like, and we can absolutely dive into more resources that we have with our housing development team and everything. I'd love to get you in contact with them for any other questions on that. I do want to make sure that we get to all of our groups today. So I know that we've still got, Sean, do you mind just giving us an overview of your group and what they have mentioned during their discussion?
Sure. When we were talking about strengths, our group talked about the community has a variety of types of communities, that we have a variety of communities in Hillsborough County, and that's a strength. And also that the availability of agricultural land being available for farming in Hillsborough County is a strength of our community. When we were talking about what types of developments the group wanted to see in the future, they were concerned about sprawl. They did not want to see sprawl. They said there's an appreciation of natural resources, and that they didn't want to see those natural resources damaged by development. They wanted to see more mixed use for families. Particularly, this person mentioned the Valrico area, and they also had an example. They mentioned a development called Bonnet Springs and Lakeland as an example of one that they were pointing to. They also talked about, there was discussions about the need for a variety of lot sizes and housing types for all ages, incomes, and ability. When we were talking about what we want to see preserved, there was a comment about that they wanted to have a balance of both urban and rural developments, wanted to preserve the balance of different types of development types. And what they wanted to avoid was, they said they wanted to avoid too much density. They wanted to avoid sprawl. And in particular, what they were saying was that there should be some density in certain locations, but some also lower density or rural areas. So they wanted to preserve the different types of communities and not have too much density that's overtaking everything. When we were talking about what the community needs will increase with more growth, schools, teachers, essential health workers came up, parks, schools came up again. That was mentioned more than once, and other services. Sidewalks was mentioned, that many areas will need sidewalks. Transportation issues that we already have are already a problem, and they were concerned about increasing transportation issues, difficulty with commuting or with school busing. They mentioned that many roads cannot handle the influx of more traffic. They were concerned about the changing of the character of rural areas. There was a comment they wanted to make sure rural areas stayed rural. There were concerns about light pollution and destruction of native flora and fauna that might come with development. They wanted to avoid that. They also were concerned about flooding. It was mentioned that more development might mean less permeable land for rain to be absorbed. Apparently, one commenter said that they already have flooding on their streets, and there wasn't really an ability for the water to go anywhere or absorb into the ground. So those were the concerns we heard, and that's those were the comments from my group.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. And very quickly, I just want to take time to talk about our next steps. And then I promise, Elizabeth, I see your hand. I am going to get to you first during our Q&A. So I truly appreciate everyone's excellent discussion. Throughout this entire process, we will be using your meaningful feedback to guide decisions. And we have a few ways that you can stay involved. There are public meetings throughout May, June, and July, both in person and virtually, that we would love for you to attend. As we mentioned earlier, we'll be taking a deep dive into some of these changes that we're anticipating. You can also take our survey to tell us how you think we should grow by scanning the QR code on your screen or going to bit.ly/LetUsKnowHC. And yes, this is the same QR code as you saw previously. We'll be doing several rounds of engagement throughout the process, and we should see the final recommendations in the fall. So keep an eye on your email and follow us for social media on more ways to get involved. So now we'll go ahead and take some time for questions. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the chat box. We can see those, or use your raise hand feature. And when we call on you, you should be able to unmute yourself. And Elizabeth, let me start with you. Thank you so much.
I really didn't have a question, but I was in Alex's group when we split off. And I think one of the things that wasn't mentioned was as far as like resources, like the children's center, like we have one, right? In Temple Terrace, where I live, in unincorporated Hillsborough County. That's the closest one for us. But once these big developments come in with all these hundreds of thousands of people moving here, we're going to need more resources. So that really wasn't a question. It was just something that wasn't mentioned when Alex was going through. And I'm sure he can't mention everything, but that was, for me, a big highlight point that I wanted to mention.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate you letting us know. Brad.
Hi, yeah, I did want to say something that we didn't really mention or touch on. I didn't really hear it in any of the other group conversations. And again, I don't know that this is a popular topic. I know there's a lot of various media coverage out there, but we are on the verge of autonomous vehicles getting more and more involved. To what extent will this comp plan update address some of that in more specific terms? Is there going to be some changes to the transportation portion, or is there anywhere in particular at this comprehensive plan level that's going to be incorporated?
I can tell you, Brad, that we have already updated our mobility section for our comprehensive plan. And so this section that we're updating now is primarily just for the future land use. So we'll be looking at kind of the connections and how we connect our spaces. But that mobility section has already been updated, and Gina's popped her face on. She may have some further comments on that as our expert.
Yeah, I just wanted to make you aware that I'm with the Transportation Planning Organization, which is the transportation arm of the Planning Commission, basically. And we are updating our long-range transportation plan, just like this comprehensive plan. It looks out to 2050. We've done electric vehicle studies to help inform the decisions that we make. And we'll be asking similar questions, but really focused on transportation in the next, like probably in the fall is when we're going to start doing more of our outreach. And it's a great point. it changes the idea of where, parking, do we need as much parking or do we need more? There's just a lot of conversation around that autonomous vehicle discussion. And I love that you brought it up, and we should have more for you as time moves forward this year.
Thanks. Yeah, that was that was kind of where I was going with that. I think there is a link between land use elements and those mobility elements. And if one of them addresses it and the other one doesn't, obviously there could be some issues. So it sounds like that's being well coordinated. And I know we already have a lot of autonomous vehicles operating in the area for various things. So that's nice to know that everything is kind of going in that route. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Gina. David.
Hey, this might be an interesting question. Would solar canopies in parking lots be considered land use? Because I went to Whit Reamer and I said that back in Suffolk County on Long Island, they're going to be 70% wind and solar and in 7 years. And he said, well, where would we put all the solar panels? And he pointed out what you described. There's only 13 or 17% of buildable land left in the urban core. So where would it go? And I looked into that question, and they've got it in their parking lots. So that would be use of land, wouldn't it? Land use would be installing solar panels wherever we possibly can. But that might be in a link up between, transportation. It's all connected, but this is specifically land use. Thanks for my question.
Thanks, David. And Melissa and Andrea, feel free to let me know if I'm wrong, but I believe that those types of, that granular of a level is usually dictated with the zoning. Is that correct?
Yes, I would also echo that answer, that sounds like something that would be more a development standard or a detail that would be in a land development code. So that is beyond the purview of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep it in mind as we move forward to see if there are any ways that we can kind of connect those and work with the zoning districts to correlate those efforts. So thank you so much, David. Irvin.
Yes, I'm looking at the plan. It seems that everything is circulated around vehicles on the road, but there's nothing for trains. There's nothing for rail commuting to decrease automobile use and density on the roads. I don't understand. I'm from Chicago, but I've been here since 2000, and I do not understand why Tampa or Hillsborough County does not have a commuter train, like to get from Ruskin to downtown Tampa, or from Valrico over to the train, and then you connect it into downtown Tampa. Imagine that would alleviate all the traffic, some of the traffic on I-4. But I see roads going in, which, we talking about all this density and widen all the roads, but why no trains?
A great question, Irvin. Gina, I see you
just
back on.
Melissa, did you want to? Melissa, looked like you were diving in.
No, Gina, transportation expert, you go for it.
This was for you, Gina. That was right up your
Well, and the long range plan is definitely going to be, an opportunity to take in the comments that you just made. We have been looking at this every long range plan since I've been an employee for over 30 years. There were times that we saw that there might be a little bit more support for that idea of like a light rail, where it would work the best. We noticed through our studies from USF to downtown to the airport, and the commuter rails, just like you stated. They haven't really received the support from the community as a whole for funding it. And because of that, we can keep coming up with great plans, but until there's going to be a funding, and I hate that answer, but that is really the truth. That
because I'm trying to understand where you get the funding for all the new roads and widening the roads.
Yeah.
Why could that fund be for the train?
Yeah, they're different. They're actually different funding sources completely, but there has to be a desire here from our community to do that. And we have seen times and for different funding sources have gotten support for the more urban area, like in the city of Tampa has supported that in their votes in the past for things that didn't end up passing. But I think that this is something we cannot ignore. I think it works. There was a study regionally that we could connect to Brooksville to like a commuter rail, like you mentioned. And I don't think that these things are, never going to happen. I actually think that they will happen, but we have to keep saying that we want this and we have to prepare ourselves to make it happen.
Yeah.
Like the high-speed rail.
And Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, but that long-range transportation plan that you're about to update, just like we're updating this comprehensive plan now, that long-range transportation plan, as well as the comprehensive plan, is what guides, it's the beginning process to guide that funding, right? To say, this is what our community wants. And so by our community getting involved in these types of discussions, they can have a say in, hey, we want real, or we want, sidewalks, or, whatever that might be. Am I on the right track there, Gina?
Was that a question? I'm sorry, Melissa.
Yeah, am I on the right track, or
yeah,
what do you think? Yeah.
Definitely.
I would say yes, and I would also add that in addition to the long-range transportation planning that Gina is talking about, in the comprehensive plan last year when we updated the mobility element, as Amy mentioned previously, there's a lot of great policy direction in the mobility element about transit supportiveness. So having varying options on how to get around besides just being vehicle dependent. So we use that as sort of a visionary, stepping off point, kind of a zoomed out version of what you want your community to be like. So when we do have more detailed plans, or we do have community support or political support, or we do have funds available, then we already have kind of those bones already there.
Because it seems that a lot of people are complaining about the traffic and the density on the roads. I don't see where the problem lies, that the community wouldn't believe in the diversion of funds toward the light rail from something else.
Absolutely, Irvin. And I think as we go through the long-range transportation plan process, as we set that long-range vision, those are exactly the kinds of questions that we'll be asking the community. What are your priorities? We've got this pot of money, right? We've got this much money. Where do we want to see this in 10, 20, 30 years? And so that's excellent question. C. Van Gilder. Yeah, thank you, Irvin.
Hi, yeah, at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned 107,000 jobs forecasted. Where geographically in the county do you think most of those would be located?
Let me reach out to Andrea or Melissa. Do you have some, do we have
Well,
that? I think we have that map, right?
That's a great question. Oh, Sean, I'm sorry, you responding?
I don't have a map. I was just going to say I don't have a map readily available unless you have one, Andrea. But they most of the jobs, they are spread out throughout the county, and they tend to mirror the areas that are also populated, but they tend to concentrate along the major corridors where there's commercial and industrial type development.
I-4, 75.
Right. And all the major corridors, though, all the major, even the county roads, any of the major county roads that have commercial or, would see more, would see, where the jobs are going to be located. So it's a pretty good distribution of the suburban and urban area predominantly. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
And light rail would really get them back and forth to work.
And may I have a second question? Does Hillsborough have a local food systems plan to produce more food locally?
I know that we do have a local food systems policy and a committee. We also have the Hillsborough County also has several other resources. We'd be happy to get you in touch with them for more information on those.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions anyone would like to? Oh, Dustin.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what the gentleman was talking about, the transportation. And I know that one of the employees said that there isn't a push by the community for that. Well, that's actually false because we have passed various measures for getting transportation updated and all that. Unfortunately, we've had people within the community who don't want to have to pay an increase of 1 cent sales tax. So they've taken the measures to court and have won it. So, to say that there's not a desire to have that there is a strong desire to have that there. Unfortunately, we do have people in the community who, for some reason or another, can't handle paying a 1 cent increase in taxes and are adamant about ruining it. But I mean, he's spot on. We do need to have something because it doesn't seem like there is any sort of plan for transportation around here. For many years, I've been saying, hey, why isn't there a circular rail system that goes around the Bay Area? That would be wonderful because, we have the issue with nobody wants to go see the Rays games out in St. Pete. I mean, who does if you live over here in the Tampa area? That's why we're pushing to get the Rays to move over here in Tampa somewhere. A central location where everybody in the area can come to. It's a niche spot, but if you have a rail system, then I don't have to sit there and wait in traffic to get over to the stadium if you've ever been over there. And so I just look at it as like, it doesn't, from my perspective, when somebody says we do have a transportation plan, I just look at it as like, well, I've lived here for quite a long time. It doesn't seem like it's happening, or else that plan's getting tossed away based upon, what the county leadership dictates at the time. I guess, if anything out there is as we go forward, I think, I hear people say about, well, we need to have affordable housing. Yes, I agree with that. But at the same time is, the question was asked by somebody, what is affordable housing? What is that definition? We've gotten various. It's going to be a complicated thing, but I think if we all work together, I'm sure we could figure out these problems where we can maintain rural capability, provide some sort of affordable housing, and yet accomplish some of these other goals. Now, one thing that has to be looked at is we're not going to be able to please everybody. Maybe that affordable housing is not going to be, all the niceties and live in $1 million mansions. But hey, it's affordable housing. I think that's what people just have to have a reality set in is what are those expectations? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dustin. And I absolutely agree. We're all here for the same reason, and it's because we care about our communities. So if we come together, we can absolutely figure this out together. I love that. Thank you. And we've got time for one more question, David.
It was on the transportation thing. I'm pretty sure that I'm right on this, is that Pasco County voted 3 times over 10 years to maintain their transportation tax. I believe they do it through gasoline. They pay 5 cents more a gallon for gasoline than us. And why on God's green earth are those people, whoever they are, and I think I have a good idea who they are holding up our transportation money, and the money that was taken away, it's not coming back to us. It's being held captive by Tallahassee, which it just puts one more stumbling block in programs like what you're trying to, things that you're trying to accomplish here. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And if you do want to learn more about anything like the tax that David and Dustin have been talking about, or about our affordable housing programs, we'd love to talk with you more about that and provide you any kind of resources that might be useful as we go through our discussion. But with that, I am so thankful for everyone for this wonderful discussion, for you being here. And if you have any additional questions, please contact us at any time. You can see our contact information on the screen here. Also, make sure you follow us on social media for more updates on this and other projects. And thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.